You ever get home after a long day at the work factory, ready to boot up your favorite casual, but also for some reason insanely sweaty first-person shooter game, only to find that the new mode they just added and you loved has been removed indefinitely for no discernible reason? And do we have a solution for you? We don't, actually. Yeah, sorry to get your hopes up, the black and white and all that. Am I the only one who's getting tired of this happening literally every week? Like, they finally added a damn escort mode. Man, I love escort modes. I've been begging for an escort mode to come back to Call of Duty since it left in like 2015. But then the season ended, so it had to go bye-bye, and now the only way that I'm ever gonna walk something down an aisle while dodging gunfire and mean language along the way is if I go back to Texas to be in my gay cousin's wedding party. Or I guess if I finally bite the bullet and just try X-Defying again. And that started to get me thinking about all of the cool new modes that COD has introduced over the years, but then have been either abandoned completely or pushed so far onto the back burner that its ice cubes are starting to grow mold. Meanwhile, the devs are only interested in supporting whatever the fucking CDL decides they don't hate this week. Like, are we actually talking about gentlemen's agreeing to not sprint next year? Like, what is happening over there, man? Anyway, I'm talking game modes like Grind, Prop Hunt, Gridiron, Heist, VIP, Drop Zone, Prisoner Rescue, Intercept, Knockout. Those are all real modes, except for the one that I made up. All new and unique ways of playing the game that felt refreshing, or at least a little bit different than the TDM, kill-confirmed, domination, and hardpoint mosh pits that make up 80% of the featured playlist tab. But instead, they're turned into good old LTMs, destined to be enjoyed for about 4 hours before being cast into the Shadow Realm for the next year and a half. Now, I'm not going to go too into detail on why things are the way that they are, or how it's bad that things are the way that they are. Instead, I want to take a minute to shine a light on a handful of different game modes that have just been removed, forgotten about, or otherwise abandoned that I think we don't talk about enough. Hello, and welcome to my corner office. It is the corner of my office that I dress up to look professional, like I'm a real full-blown adult. You can see I graduated from school. I have a printer to fax my homies, and I even have a trash can with a lid. So the first abandoned game mode I want to talk about for a little bit is Gunfight. Now, obviously, Gunfight is like still in the game. If you scroll way over there, in MW3, not only was Gunfight added in the post-launch during Season 1, fucking called that one, but it was also a carbon copy of the mode in Modern Warfare 22, right down to the map selection being exactly the same, with those maps being carried forward. Now, don't get me wrong, that would have been a-okay with me had they been the maps that were added in post-launch, right? All the cool ones, Penthouse, King, that one that was like Shoot House but smaller. But instead, they were the 3 that already came at the launch of Gunfight a year ago, meaning that we got the exact same drop 12 months apart. And, what the fuck? And in that time since release, Gunfight has received a single new map, and the rest of the playlist has just been backfilled with every shoebox map, you know, like Meat and Stash House. Literally getting table scraps from the one playlist that they actually want to develop content for. And one thing I'm realizing that I think will become more clear as this video progresses is that Modern Warfare 22, for all of its faults, really tried to juggle these different modes decently well compared to all the games around it, at least. Like with Gunfight, we saw a bunch of different variants that year. Armored Gunfight, custom loadouts, I think a snipers only playlist was in there at some point. But when it came time to port Gunfight over into the next game this year, all of that was axed, and instead we got Team Gunfight, which by the way is a terrible name because Gunfight is already a team-based mode, but all that it was Gunfight, but 6v6 on regular maps, which confused me because I thought that that was the niche that Cutthroat was supposed to fill. You guys remember Cutthroat, right? The game mode that the devs birthed into this world and then forgot at the reception desk when checking out of the hospital. It almost reminds me of, you guys remember Champion Hill from Vanguard? If you don't, it was like 2v2 Gunfight, but in between each round, you would all return to a hub world where you could spend points that you earned during the match on new weapons and equipment. Now, personally, I thought that was a really cool evolution to the mode and kind of incorporated the tournament aspect of Gunfight better than actual Gunfight tournaments did. You know what else has to make a return? Slasher, aka Mike Myers. Not that. Some of my best childhood memories were relived during MWR when they finally made that an official mode, and I'm really shocked that we didn't see it return ever again. And in that same kind of vibe universe, do you guys remember Free Run in BO3? It was fun for about 45 seconds or so, and I'm happy to see a spiritual successor recently added to MW3 now with Get High, and I'd love to see them double down on this concept, you know? It could become like COD's version of Subway Surfer, or whatever CS game mode was underneath every Leafy video a few years ago. And now for big team modes, which Call of Duty has been trying to shoehorn into the game to universal... of which there are 4 specific modes that I want to talk about. And the first is Ground War, which I honestly love. It's a great change of pace, and the sheer scale of it all means that it generally doesn't get too sweaty, and if it ever does, you can just switch to another part of the map, and the whole dynamic changes. It's the closest thing that we have to that whole "it's a new story each match" talking point that everybody makes about games without SBMM. In MW3, Ground War is technically in the game, but just like Gunfight, it's a carbon copy from last year with no new changes or improvements. And while it did launch with 3 new maps, these are the only 3 maps that you can play on. And it, along with Invasion, are the literal last things on the playlist list. And it really feels like the devs just gave up on the idea of big modes in general this year. And it's a shame because there's so many aspects to the modern MW sandbox that serve almost no purpose in regular MP, that seemingly were made specifically with big team modes in mind, for it all to just be forgotten about, because it's easier to grind camos out on shipment than Orlov military base. The second big team mode that I want to talk about are what I call the Ground War spin-off modes. Things like 12v12 Search or Big CTF. These took place on those same Ground War maps, but at times cut down to an appropriate size. And again, I thought these were really fun, but unlike Ground War, that at least had a dedicated spot on the roster, these were always made as limited time modes, and didn't quite make the jump to MW3 at all. And I'll say this in every video I ever make, I am not a game dev, but if I spend weeks, if not months, developing, building, and then playtesting a new project to go live as part of my work, and then after 3 weeks it just gets deleted forever, like, that's gotta be so deflating. So they just don't want to waste their time, and honestly, I can't blame them. And in a very similar vein was Arms Race in Vanguard, which dropped about halfway through Vanguard's post-launch season, if I remember correctly, and it was their version of Ground War, except with the added wrinkle of fortifying bases. It only received that single map, likely because Vanguard was such a flop that Activision pulled the plug and rerouted resources away from it, but I just wish that it had more of a spotlight even at the time, because it was the most ambitious and completely original mode that Call of Duty has made in a long time. And then lastly, there's Cold War's Fireteam modes, which were squad-based with teams of 4 and had you all fighting over certain objectives depending on the individual mode. And now this was weirdly not a part of Warzone that year, despite featuring multiple different features that were only found in Warzone at the time, like doors and armor. And unlike the rest of the big team modes on this list, I really didn't like this one like at all. I think that's just because I'm not a fan of like armor-based combat at all. It's a big reason why Warzone just doesn't speak to me personally. There's not too much more that I can say about it really, because it is impossible to find a lobby for it these days. So instead, here's some Outbreak gameplay, which took place on the same maps. And oh boy, isn't that a fantastic transition to the next game mode I want to talk about? Modern Warfare Zombies. This thing was a damn roller coaster, man. It was initially announced to almost universal size, as everyone thought it would be terrible, and it only served to take Treyarch away from what we thought was Gulf War zombies at the time. But upon release, it actually became a lot of people's favorite mode. But the mode just wasn't supported long term, or at least not to the caliber that we're used to with zombies, or even DMZ if we're following that blueprint. Now, this might be the hottest take of my career, so, you know, go and strap in. Not every Call of Duty game needs zombies. Like, instead of having Treyarch's B team work on a purposefully watered down version of their zombies mode, or even having the main developer make their own version of zombies like Spaceland or Exo Zombies, I would much rather they pour those resources into making a co-op mode that fit the theme and style of the game that they're working on, and was given the same level of detail that apparently only Treyarch is able to give. When I heard that MW22 would have the return of Spec Ops mode for the first time since 2019, which man, we don't talk about 2019 Spec Ops mode, I was ecstatic to hear that it was coming back. And the missions that were in the game at launch were actually pretty fun. I don't know if anyone's actually, like, played them, but, like, they're solid. But the progression around those 3 levels was confusing and unrewarding, and there's only a total of 1 new mission added in the post-launch, so it all felt forgotten about at the get-go. Then there were raids, which I thought were a great idea, but the #1 complaint that everyone, including myself, had was that you needed exactly 3 players to launch. This isn't like when Warzone only has trios available for some reason, where 2 players can still play without squad fill, but instead you needed exactly 3 people in your party, or jump in with a random, which, hey, IW, have you even met a random? I'm down! That alone cut out a significant portion of the player base right there, and led to a lot of people just skipping them entirely, which it really sucks. Like, maybe it's because I'm getting older and my tastes have changed, but like, I don't want to be sweaty all the damn time. Sometimes I want to chill and relax in a casual co-op PvE mode. And unfortunately, every time that it seems like they're going in that direction, trying to develop something like that, they just get 50% of the way there and then fumble it somehow. Like, I'm really hoping that with games like Helldivers, Pal World, and even Lethal Company just exploding this past year.
Oh, this bridge is rattly.
That they really try to hammer out a solid co-op experience soon, because clearly there's an audience there, and usually when a specific kind of game just blows up, COD jumps in a few years later with BR, extraction shooters, and Among Us. Yeah, that's right, the Among Us mode in Cold War wasn't a fever dream. I really thought it was. Had to do some research, had to Google this thing, but it was real. It actually happened. Now, obviously, there's a million more, but I really just wanted to focus on this video in, like, the more recent-ish era of Call of Duty. If there's one commonality, though, between all of these modes, it's that, for the most part, they're kind of a good base, but a lack of support or incentive to play it has killed a lot of them on entry, or at the very least, put him in a damn wheelchair. But that's where the catch-22 comes in, right? Because you can't have all of these modes and also have them all be supported. And so something is always going to be left out. That's just how it is always going to, unfortunately, happen. But I guess what my point is that if you have a half-baked idea that you don't plan on supporting, maybe just don't make it. And instead, save up all your attention points, like this is an RPG, and apply them towards something that you are going to bake fully. Give it time to cook and let it thrive in the same way that you do zombies every 3rd year. And if you're gonna add new 6v6 modes, please, just add them to the damn quick play filter, man. I just want to play Escort. Let me play Escort. Anyway, I have another video talking about how this current practice is kind of what's killing the franchise at the moment. It does a way better job of breaking it down and explaining it than I am here. So if you like this video, go ahead. I would recommend watching that one next. And real quick shout out to everyone whose gameplay I had to shamelessly rip from YouTube to make this video happen. As it turns out, when you make an entire video about abandoned game modes, many of which have been lost to time, you can't exactly just hop in the game and capture some footage quick. Oopsie. So shout out to all these guys who I pulled footage from. Please don't sue me. And everyone else, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button or that join button if you want to become a channel member, and I'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, I'll take a page out of my own book and water this plant. Hey, it's not spring yet, right?